I'm here with my favorite reads of 2024. I have 12 favorites, I believe, and some honorable mentions. So we're gonna start with some honorable mentions. I feel like there's an honorable mention coming later, but that's because of reasons. But my first honorable mentions here I'm going to talk about. The first one is Saga Volume 11. I feel like this is an honorable mention for me just because this series just has a special place in my heart, and I love every single one of these that comes out, and I feel like I don't have to say much about it because it's Volume 11. And I've talked about this before. Every time I've done a favorites video where I've read the next installment of Saga, I've talked about it. And I've talked about this series a bunch. And it's just one of those series where, like, I'm always going to love the next one that comes out. Same with my next one, which is The Mandalorian Season 2 Part 1. I just love The Mandalorian. It's such a comfort to me, the show and these comics. The comics are exactly the same as the show. Just you're looking at drawings instead of people on the TV. And it's just as a comfort for me that I love so much and want to give it a little bit of credit. And the last two honorable mentions in this section are volumes 11 and 12 of Spy Family, which I feel like I need no explanation. I feel like I have talked about Spy Family countless times on this channel now. Every single time I've read a new one, I've talked about it. They were in my favorite reads of 2023. I read the first 10 last year. And again, these are so adorable, hilarious, silly. These are like a hug by someone who is really funny, like your super funny best friend. And they're ridiculous. They crack me up. I love them so much. And just like Saga and The Mandalorian, any new one that comes out, I'm gonna love. And they need a little bit of love. Now we're gonna get to my favorites minus my top three. I have a top three that I'm gonna talk about at the end. These are in no particular order. I am talking about them in the order that I pulled them off my shelf, and that I'm now pulling them from the top of the pile next to me here. The first one that I have here is The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane by Kate DiCamillo. This book broke me to pieces. It is about a toy rabbit that is very, very full of himself. He thinks he's the best thing to ever exist in the entire world, and everyone should always love him. And he ends up getting lost, and it is about his miraculous journey going from person to person and being owned by different people who need him in their life for different reasons, and him growing as a person. He's a toy, but, growing as a toy rabbit. And it is just, it's going to rip your heart out. But, like, in a good way. Sometimes in a bad way, but in a good way, mostly. It's so good. It needs no other explanation other than just like, if you want a quick, fast read that's going to make you sob, this'll do it. Then I have Heir Apparently by Kara McDowell. This is a sequel to The Prince and the Apocalypse. The Prince and the Apocalypse is about someone who is in England on her last day of her school vacation and gets stuck there because the world is ending. There's a comet that's coming to destroy the earth, and she's trying to get home with the prince, and because she meets him accidentally earlier in the story. It's not important, but anyway, this is the sequel that I can't really get into what it's about and what happens in it because it's gonna like spoil stuff from the first book. I feel like just the fact that there's a sequel is already a big spoiler to the first book. But anyway, these books are just so much fun. They're so cute and silly and just adorable, and this one was no exception. It was so fun, so cute. I read it in 2 days. It was so hard to put down. It's just so easy to just keep reading. It's just like fun, simple, fast, easy reading. And it's just, the writing is just like simple, but not in a bad way. Simple in like a way that just makes it easy to keep reading like you're eating candy. It was so good. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I have decided I will read anything by this author. And I think I have, actually. I think I've read all of her books that are out so far, but I don't know. I'll have to look into it, but she's great. If you like YA romance, definitely check her out. The next one here is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston, which I feel like shouldn't be a surprise because there's another book by Ashley Poston that I read last year that was on my favorites list from last year. This story is about someone who is currently living in her recently deceased aunt's apartment that her aunt always told her had some kind of magic going on in it, in which sometimes it brings you back in time to 7 years before. And it's the apartment that decides when to do it and when to let you out back to the regular time. And one day she comes home into the apartment and it's 7 years ago, while her aunt was somewhere off in a different country, and she subletted it to this gorgeous guy, of course. And so she keeps going back and forth between present time and the 7 years prior where this guy is living in her apartment. And but it's not her apartment 7 years ago, it's her aunt's apartment, but she has nowhere else to go, and she can't control when the time changes, like when the time traveling happens. And it was so good. I love Ashley Poston's romances so much. I feel like the characters are so strong and the stories are just so well fleshed out. And I ate this up. So I read this so fast. And I loved the guy. I thought the story was so interesting. I love the way she incorporates something like magical into the story and makes it feel so real. Love it so much. It's so good. My next favorite here is Daughter of the Pirate King by Trisha Levenseller. This book was just a hoot. A big hoot. Oh my God. The biggest owl you can find, their biggest hoot. That's what this was. This is about a badass girl pirate who, I don't even actually remember the premise. She's trying to take over a ship. And by doing so, she purposely gets captured by the people on the ship so that she can take it over. She has to get a map or something. She has to find a map to her mom. I don't even remember, but it was so good. It was just so much fun. It had a fun enemies to lovers romance that I approved of. I don't like most enemies to lovers romance. I guess saying that I don't approve of them is not the right wording. Read what it makes you happy. That's great. But for me and my reading tastes, I liked this type of enemies to lovers. And it was so much fun. I had so much fun reading this. I thought it was so great. The next one here is actually a recent read, so I talked about this in a recent favorites video. But that is A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. And first of all, can we just look at how fucking pretty this book is. This takes place in a modern fantasy world where women are not allowed to study literature, and it's about someone who would love to study literature, but she's not allowed, so she's studying architecture, and she enters a contest to basically help fix up the house of her favorite author who has just recently died. And she wins the contest, and she goes to this town that he lived in to try and fix his house, but there's also a literature student there who's trying to prove that this author didn't actually write the books that are by him. And they're both trying to get to the bottom of this together. There's also, it also kind of straddles the line between fantasy and reality. His most famous book is about someone falling in love with the Fairy King. And there's a lot of stuff about whether or not the Fairy King is real or just fiction, and if she's seeing the Fairy King or not. And I thought it was so good. It's a very quiet, slow moving story that's very, very much focuses on the characters and their thoughts and what they're doing and how they feel about the situations. It's not a very plot driven book, but I loved it so much. It was so cozy and quiet and wonderful and just atmospheric to me. I loved this. My next one here is God Killer by Hannah Kaner, which takes place in a fantasy world where gods have been outlawed. And there is a god for every little tiny thing that there can be. And it follows a god killer. So she's basically a contract killer for gods. So she won't just kill a god if there happens to be a god there. But if she's been hired to kill this god and will be paid for it, she will kill them. It's about her and a girl who's lost her family, who's traveling with her own little god, and somebody else who is trying to help save the life of his best friend. And they're all traveling together to the same city that still has a whole bunch of gods left in it, all for their own reasons. And it is a little slow moving, kind of quiet, and it follows each different character. They get their own chapters. And I loved this as well. What I loved the most about it was the contradiction with the gods and how they're helpful, but how they're also not helpful. How they, want to help people, but how they also don't care about people. And a lot of my tabs in the book are about the thoughts on like higher powers and stuff like that. And I thought it was really cool. The next one I have here is A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers. I read the first book in this series last year, and that was also on my favorite reads of 2023. So this is the sequel to the Monk and Robot series, which is about a non-binary monk who has kind of lost their way in life and is trying to find themselves. And they do that along with a robot who has never met a human before. And the story is just about them discovering things about themselves and each other and learning about each other and about their friendship growing and evolving and learning about the world around them and how they fit into it. There's no like real conflict in these stories. It's just like the conflict that these people have within themselves. And they're really short, as you can see, but just absolutely delightful. Like, I cried reading both of these because they're so wonderful, and just the realizations that they come to, the things that they talk about and how they talk about it, so wonderful. I really hope there's going to be more in this series. Maybe there already is and I'm just not aware, but I hope. The next one I have here is Mislaid in Parts Half Known by Sean McGuire, which is part of the Wayward Children series. I don't even know what number this is anymore at this point. 9. This is book 9. And I also talked a lot about these. I talk about them every year because a book comes out every year. And I read it as soon as it comes out because I love them. They're also quick, fast reads. They follow children who go to a boarding school for people who have gone to magical worlds and come back and are having trouble with being back. And every other book in the series is a standalone. So all of the odd-numbered books you have to read the previous odd number book in order to read the next odd numbered book. And they all go together in one series, and all the even numbered books are standalones. You could read them in any order that you want, and you could also skip some if you wanted to, and you don't have to read any of the odd numbered books to read any of the even numbered books, which is really cool. But I read them all in publication order, and reading them in publication order is also acceptable. I feel like also if you read it in publication order, then it kind of just gives you more of an understanding and a feel for the worlds and the characters, and it just gives you more of an appreciation for what you're reading. But again, you don't have to, which is really cool. So this is one of the odd numbered books, so you have to read the previous odd numbered books to really understand what's going on. And one of the characters in this is the main character from the previous even numbered book. So I feel like you don't have to read the even numbered book before this, but would really deepen your appreciation for this one if you had read it. But it's really cool. I can't get into too much about what this is about because it's going to do a whole bunch of spoiling, but loved it. And then I have Nimona by Noelle Stevenson, which is just a delightful little graphic novel about someone who has just appointed herself the city's supervillain's sidekick. And he's like, I don't need a sidekick, go away. And she's like, no. When can we stab people? And it's really funny. It has gorgeous illustrations, and it also has, people learning about themselves and discovering things about themselves as well. Like, it's got a little bit of depth to it. And I read this, it's not much of an accomplishment to say that I read this in one sitting. I read most comics and graphic novels in one sitting, but I just flew through it because it was so good. It was great. Now I'm going to get into my top 3. So my third favorite book of 2024 is The Darkness Outside Us by Elliot Schreifer. This book is a doozy. So this is about 2 people who wake up on a spaceship, and they're from rival countries that have basically been in war with each other. And they're on a spaceship. They're the only 2 people on this spaceship on their way to try and save one of the characters' sisters. They have no memory of anything that has happened. They don't even remember getting on the ship or anything. And it is about them discovering secrets on the ship and also remembering things and figuring things out. And it is such a wild ride. And it also has repeated devastation. Devastation over and over again. It happens a lot. It will make you cry a lot. But when I got to the part where they were starting to figure things out, I was just goosebumps, shock. It was just, I can't say anything else, but it was good, and I could not stop thinking about it. The second book is out, and I would like it. I haven't gotten it yet, but My second favorite book of the year is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. And my other honorable mention that I said I was going to say later is Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands, which is the sequel, which I didn't love quite as much as the first one, but still loved. And so yeah, that's why I just felt like giving it an honorable mention. I don't know. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies takes place in the early 1900s, and it is the diary of Emily Wilde, who has traveled very far north to try and finish her encyclopedia about fairies because she's missing information about a specific folk that has not been seen a lot and people don't know a lot about them, and she's trying to learn about them and find them and discover things about them to put in her encyclopedia to finish it. Of course, she runs into trouble, and also the man who is like her rival at work who she hates shows up and is hilarious. Because it takes place in the early 1900s, they talk like from people from the early 1900s, which is just so charming to me. Early 1900s, like British people as well. So the way they talk is just so charming. And because it's also funny and the love interest guy is hilarious and so delightful, it just like the way they talk just adds to the charmingness to me, in my opinion. I ate this book up. I loved it so much. It brought me so much joy. That's why it's my second favorite book of the year. I'm so good at this. And now my favorite book of the year that I did also talk about recently in a recent favorites video, but that's Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. For those of you who did not see my November favorites video, I will give you a brief description of what it's about. I'm not going to do, if you haven't seen my November favorites video and you want to hear more about this though, I will link that video below, and I have like chapters in the video where I talk about it, so you can skip just to that. I highly recommend doing that because I'm not going to go into as much detail as I did in November, and everyone needs to read this. But anyway, this is about someone who is in space on a suicide mission to try and save Earth. That's it. I mean, it's really funny. There's way more to it than just that, but the part that is way more to it, I feel like some people would consider a spoiler, so I don't want to talk. I get into all that in my other video, so go watch that if you want to. And I'll link it down below for you. Or are cards still a thing? I'll put a card if that's still a thing up here. I don't know where. It's one of the corners. And this book like changed my life. Like it changed my brain chemistry. Like I can't handle this. First of all, if you've read The Martian, it's the main character is like the same guy as Mark. He's not Mark Watney, but he's basically Mark Watney. So if you liked Mark Watney, you're gonna love Ryland Grace. Oh my god. He's hilarious. He's so funny. And also really smart, just like Mark. All of my orange tabs are things that made me laugh out loud. Like there's a lot of funny stuff in this. Like it's hilarious. Like this, Andy Weir is really funny. And it's also got really, really interesting science stuff to back up all the stuff that's happening. Like all the stuff that's happening, besides the thing that is threatening Earth, is all like stuff that technically could happen in real life or could be real in real life because of all the science talk. It's proof. And like basically, so if you pretend the thing that's threatening Earth in this book is real, is happening in real life, all the things that they're doing are things that like technically we could do. It doesn't take place in the future. It takes place in present time, and they're using today's technology to do all of the things that they need to do in this story. It's really cool. It's fascinating. It's interesting. It's exciting and adventurous. It's got a few little twists and turns in it. And there was like actually one part when I was like sobbing reading this book, and my mom was like, maybe you should take a break and finish reading it another day. And I was like, no, this book is amazing. I'm going to be thinking about this for like till the end of time, basically. There's also a movie coming out. I don't know when. Next year? I'm pretty sure they're done filming it already. So hopefully, no, that next year is this year. 2025 is what I meant to say. So anyway, hope they don't fuck it up. If not, the book still exists and the book can be reread. But, oh my god, so good. Anyway, those were all my favorite books that I read in 2024. I hope if you've read any of these books, you also liked them. If not, I'm sorry, that sucks. It sucks reading books you don't like, but that's life. And if you haven't read any of these, I hope I've convinced you to read some of them. And if you do, I hope you love them as much as I do, or at least partly as much as I do. And I guess that's all. Let me know your favorite books of the year. And yeah, we'll see you in my next video. Have a good day. Bye.